Listen to podcasts of Joe Walsh and Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Dan and Amy, we've got bigger matters to address, but I'm a little bit perplexed by IHOP.
Turning into IHOB.
IHOB.
This is a great PR
International
stunt.
House of Pancakes now becoming International House of Bacteria?
No, International House of Breakfast.
Oh, breakfast, of course.
So maybe if you want to watch the carb intake, which I'm sure you're very concerned about these days.
Well, it's just a name change. It's not a menu change.
Well, no, but it's letting people know that there's other thing than just pancakes on the
Was
menu.
anybody confused that you could only get pancakes at International House of Pancakes?
Yeah, I thought it was pancakes only, but they have omelets and everything you can imagine. Now I'm hungry. I'm getting hangry.
Okay. All right. I'm glad we got that squared away.
Yes.
Yesterday, California primary, and this remarkable result, particularly from an Illinois perspective, we've talked about this. John Cox, businessman, finishing second place, ahead of the former mayor of L.A., Villagrosa, behind Gavin Newsom, of course, the lieutenant governor, former mayor of San Francisco.
Former Kimberly Guilfoyle's husband.
Yeah,
Ex-husband,
right, the former Mr. Guilfoyle. So John Cox was sort of a perennial also-ran candidate in Illinois for the better part of the first decade of this century.
Oh, yeah.
He moves to California, and now he's, in fact, the Republican nominee for governor of that state. It's wild. I think it also probably says something about the state of the Republican Party in California. But is perhaps maybe there's the prospect for a watershed moment in California? No pun intended, since they're cracking down on the ability of Californians to use water. But you've got that, plus attacks from the left on California public policy. We mentioned it this week, this piece by Michael Schellenberger in Forbes, from a progressive perspective, saying, number one in poverty, California isn't our most progressive state, it's our most racist one. Could something be interesting afoot? Well, no better person to ask than a California denizen himself. He's our friend Victor Davis Hanson, a noted historian, National Review columnist, senior fellow at the Hoover Institute, and most recent book, The Second World Wars, How the First Global Conflict Was Fought and Won. Victor Davis Hanson, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So am I being a bit quixotic in suggesting that there's the possibility for a new day to dawn in California?
Not at all. I think it's a kind of a work in progress. I don't know if we're going to make it this year, but what's happening is that the so-called lower middle classes are starting to wake up that they pay the highest income sales gas tax, and their schools are rated, I think, 46th on test scores in the nation. The infrastructure was rated by Forbes dead, I think it was 49th after Mississippi. Well, only Mississippi was worse. And then we have 1/5 of the nation's poverty, 1/3 of all welfare recipients. But then what's weird about it is it's medieval. So the coastal corridor from San Diego to Berkeley, we have the most billionaires in the United States. We have some of the wealthiest counties, and we have this elite that runs the state, the Facebook, the Google, Stanford, Caltech, UCLA, all the big Hollywood, and they're never subject to the ramifications of their own ideology. So they don't want dams, but they want HHE water. They don't want cheap energy or affordable energy, but they live in the 70 degree weather. And the rest of the state, the other quarter and population, is angry about that. But what's also happening is people in that corridor can't buy a house. It's about $1,000 a square foot. And they won't build homes because the people who have their homes don't want neighbors. And as far as the charge of racism, it's kind of accurate because these people, if you go into Atherton or Beverly Hills or Malibu or Santa Monica, you start to see they have big walls around their homes, and they put their kids in these private academies that are sprouting in Silicon Valley like it's 1965 Alabama, and people are, fleeing the recently segregated schools. And yet, what's weird about it is they're all for open borders, and they're all for these radical identity politics policies that are there for high-speed rail, or they're for cutting off water, or they're for wind and solar, no natural gas production. And those consequences fall on Mexican American people, poor white people, but not the people who advocate that. And people are waking up to that.
Do you think that any of them feel guilty about their wealth, that's why they're leaning left so much, because they're like, oh, we should give. That's what, the Bible teaches, to give unto others who don't have as much. I mean, what is that a possibility?
That would be a charitable possibility. There's two more cynical interpretations, and one is it's just they are selfish, and much of their money is in capital gains. It's not subject to the same rate of taxes, or they have really good tax lawyers, so they can get around the ramifications of all their ideology. And the other is sort of psychologically, they don't feel comfortable with Mexican American or poor white people or black people, and they feel sort of, they don't want to be around them. And how do they square that circle is that Mark Zuckerberg, you build a big fence around your home, and then you rail at people for being racist for not wanting open borders.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, and this water usage
It's amazing.
script law that's coming into effect in California too, to protect against climate change. This is remarkable. I want people to believe that the Silicon Valley CEOs in Mountain View are going to buy this. Starting in 2022, California will limit water to 55 gallons per person per day. By 2030, that amount falls to 50 gallons. Just to give you a perspective, how much water is that? 1 8-minute shower is 17 gallons. One load of laundry can be up to 40 gallons. That's enough to exceed the limit. 1 8-minute shower, one load of laundry. And you're telling me that Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and the rest of them are going to be abiding?
Oh my gosh,
this,
they probably
this
afford
law?
I can tell you for a fact, if you go to Woodside or Portola Valley or areas in the L.A. hills, people have private wells. Not everybody can have a private well because there's not enough aquifer. But most importantly is that this state allowed 55 million acre feet. That's the size of 55 huge reservoirs to go out to the Pacific Ocean this last year. And so the problem isn't trying to ration water. The problem is that we inherited this wonderful water project. All we'd have to do is operate it the way it was intended, or just build 3 or 4 more dams at a price of about 1/10 of high-speed rail, and we would have enough water for everybody. Because the northern part of the state and the Sierra Nevada are very wet. That's where 80% of the precipitation and snow falls. But 80% of the people don't live there. So our grandfathers developed this brilliant idea of the California Aqueduct and 28 huge dams, and it works really well, but not if you take the water out of the dam and you send it out to the Pacific Ocean and the Sacramento and San Joaquin rivers. It was never intended to do that.
Yeah, that's remarkable.
And they're doing it because they like the idea of white water, and they want to see if they can reintroduce salmon, and they think that it'll smelt in the Delta and need some more fresh water. But they're destroying the lives of millions of people, and they're waking up to this. And this guy named Don Cox, that you guys know better than we do, he just has 30-second ads, water, I'll get it to you. Borders.
Really?
I mean, it's redundant. It's reductions. He just says, illegal aliens, got to go home. Sanctuary cities, end them. And it's John Cox. And he's just been all over the news like that. And people are saying, wow, this guy cuts through all this talk and just gets down to it.
So wait, really, did you vote for John Cox?
I did, yeah.
Wow. Okay, so he's being received well and warmly in California, huh?
Well, I don't know if anybody knows anything about him. I don't know. I met him once, but I don't know much about him other than the fact is that he's not Gavin Newsom, and that's his appeal to people. And he's not one of the Republican sort of Rockefeller, that's an archaic term, maybe a Romney Republican that finds 1,000 different ways to not be conservative. And he doesn't seem, I don't know if he's conservative or not, but when he comes across, the ads are as much aimed at the namby-pamby Republican Party as they are at the lunatic left.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It also speaks to what's happening in the Republican Party here, that there was no traction to be had during his several runs for office in the first decade of this century. But, I mean, just the water explanation you provided, this is kind of stuff that Orwell would have had a difficult time dreaming up. And there's another example of this, and the reason I spend so much time in California, because if it's a bad idea in California or New York, you know it's going to be imported to Illinois at some point. this a story in the Wall Street Journal last week about squatters' rights in California, where you had a small-time landlord who was a landscaper professionally and had a rental property, and he totally got jammed by the squatters' rights in California, where somebody just basically broke into his house and took up residency there, and then gets financed by the state to stay there. He gets through the Sergeant Shriver Civil Counsel Act provides civil representation for individuals like squatters to fight illegitimate tenancy against a landlord like Mr. Lopez. It's just a remarkable case, and then it's a remarkable law.
And behind that is the reality that you have this ultra 1%. Remember, these companies, Apple, Google, Facebook, have over $3 trillion in capitalization. The civilization's never seen so much money in such a confined space. So, we have hundreds of thousands of millionaires in the Bay Area and the LA area, and they buy these beautiful big homes, and they put gates around them. They put their kids in private school, and then they give money to politicians that pass these laws that destroy the middle class, which they despise because it doesn't have the romance of the poor or the privilege or the culture of the elite. And then they try to feel good by helping homeless people or allowing homelessness to be all over Market Street in San Francisco or whatever. But they have ways to navigate around it. But the middle class guy who tries to have a rental, or he's got a middle class home and he wants to put a solar panel on it, he can't afford this huge electric bill he's getting, then they go after him, and they regulate him, and they fine him, and they make life miserable. And 4 million in the last 18, 20 years have left of the middle class. And that's the demography of California. Middle class leaves, illegal aliens and people on welfare come in, and wealthy people get richer and richer from a globalized high-tech economy.
Yeah, that sounds very well. Illinois is sort of a junior version of that. And yeah, of course, the challenge is, and I wonder if you're seeing this as well, is the worse that the political ruling class makes it, the better it gets for them, because the productive people who are sensible, commonsensical, they bolt. And so your margin for error shrinks because you don't have a population that can get you to 50% plus one through, with common sense proposals.
I think that's right, except something that can't go on, as Milton Friedman used to say, won't go on. And so where I live, it's 90% Hispanic, and I'm in the San Joaquin Valley, and I commute to Stanford, but it's 90 degrees yesterday, and people cannot afford to turn on their air conditioners, highest power rates in the United States. So Hispanic people go to Walmart, and they sit there all day to use the free air conditioning while they can't afford to turn their apartment air conditioning on. And they travel these decrepit roads, and they pay $4 for gas a gallon because of the tax and the special California blend. And then they see these Stonehenge half-finished overpasses for high-speed rail. And they ask you, and they talk among themselves. And they said, you know what? What's going on in this state? I can't afford power. I can't afford gas. I don't want high-speed rail. I want a good road. I can't afford housing. Who's doing this? And then you explain, and they tell you, I'm not trying to stigmatize them, but people say in general, well, I don't really want open borders. I don't want illegal aliens coming in. They ruin my school. They make my community dangerous. So I want legal, measured, and, diverse immigration. And the elite doesn't quite get it. And so that's why I think Cox did well, because the subtext of that, there was probably a lot of middle-class Hispanic people that didn't tell anybody, and in Trump fashion went in and voted for him, because he got over twice the votes as Villa de Rosa did, and who really campaigned on being a Latino.
Right.
So I think there's something going on. I think we're 4 or 5 years away from electing a guy like Cox. It reminds me of Pat Brown, 1960, 6 years before Reagan shocked everybody and won.
Interesting. Yeah, well, so enough Democrats get mugged by reality. Yeah, that's what we're hoping for here as well. He's Victor Davis Hanson, National Review columnist, senior fellow at the Hoover Institution, and author of his latest book is The Second World Wars, How the First Global Conflict Was Fought and Won. VDH, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.